Every day, data professionals spend nearly 80% of their time just preparing and cleaning data, leaving only 20% for the actual data analysis and insights that drive decisions. Imagine what you could achieve if you could flip that ratio, spending less time fixing data and more time uncovering insights. That's where Power Query comes in. It's not just a tool, it's the engine that transforms messy, raw data into clean, reliable, and analysis ready datasets. Mastering Power Query means mastering the foundation of all data analytics work. And in this masterclass, I'm going to take you from the very basic to advanced professional level transformations that will change the way you work with data forever. Now, this is the list of things that you can expect to learn by the end of this course. I have designed this course to be a go to guide for anyone who's preparing for a Power BI interview, wants to learn Power Query from scratch, or someone who just needs a refresher. So, if you're interested, let's get started. Let's start with a simple question. How many times have you copied and pasted data, cleaned up column headers, removed blank rows, split text manually, or rearranged your data only to do it all over again the next month when the new report comes in? This is where Power Query comes in, a tool that lets you automate all that tedious, repetitive work. In this video, you're going to learn how to take control of your data once and for all. So, what exactly is Power Query? Power Query is a data connection and transformation tool built into Microsoft Excel and Power BI. It lets you connect to various data sources, clean and reshape data, and then load it into Excel worksheets or Power BI for further analysis and visualization. The best part, you don't need to write complex formulas or code. Every transformation you apply is recorded as a step, and Power Query remembers it. Next time you refresh the data, all those steps happen automatically. You'll find Power Query in two main places, Excel and Power BI Desktop. In Excel, you find it under the Data tab here. And if you see in this section which says Get and Transform Data, this entire option that is available is related to Power Query. So if I click on Get Data here, you can see that I can launch the Power Query editor from here. And in Power BI, you can find Power Query inside this Transform Data tab within this Home tab. Okay, you can just click on Transform Data and it will take you to the Power Query editor window. The Power Query editor window looks something like this, and we'll get into the detail of this in a while. The interface of Power Query is identical between Excel and Power BI. So if you learn it on one platform, you automatically learn it for the other platform. Now for this video, I'm going to show you how to use Power Query within Power BI, but let me know in the comment section if you want me to create a dedicated Power Query video for Excel as well. I'll be happy to do that. Okay, so now let's quickly explore the interface of Power Query editor, and then we'll move on to importing our dataset into Power BI. So to go to Power Query editor, as I showed before, just go to Transform Data, click on Transform Data here, and this will open up Power Query editor. If you look at the top, it contains couple of tabs here which says Home, Transform, Add Columns, View, Tools, and then Help. Now, essentially, in the Home tab, it contains all the commonly used functions or buttons within Power Query editor so that it creates a shortcut for you. You don't have to go to other tabs to kind of find out most commonly used functions. The Transform tab gives you those functionalities which helps you transform your data in terms of, let's say, splitting your columns or formatting your columns or changing your data types, pivoting, unpivoting, replacing values, grouping, and many others. So there are a lot of functionalities stored in this tab. The third one is add column, which simply means that you can create custom columns within your data using this tab. Now, if you notice, most of the buttons on this and on other tabs are disabled. That is because we have not imported any data set yet. Once we import our data set, then all of these will get enabled. Then on the fourth tab, it's a view tab, which simply gives you multiple options to view your data with certain specifications or certain data preview options. The tool tab gives you the option to start a diagnostic or certain diagnostic options to help you gauge your Power Query steps performances. And finally is the help tab, which is nothing but few documentation and support which you can get from Microsoft. Now, let's just quickly import a dataset in. There are two ways to import a dataset into Power Query. You can do it from the front end of Power BI Desktop by going to Get Data and selecting the type of dataset you have. Or else, you can also go to the Power Query editor and go to New Source and select it from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the front end here, and in the Power BI Desktop, I'm going to click on Get Data and then choose CSV from this. Once you choose your dataset, it will give you a data preview. Now, as you see, the dataset that we are using today is a average salary by job classification data. It's a small 300 row items data which shows you many positions that are there in the United States and what is the average base salary for those positions. And then finally a column for number of employees which were used to create that average base salary. Now, there are two options again in this window. You can either load it directly or you can transform your data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this transform data, because load simply loads it into Power Query and then gives you a table at the right hand side here in the Power BI desktop window. But now, because we are trying to learn how to perform the entire ETL operations within Power Query, which is extract, transform, and load, I'm going to first click on transform. Once you click that, it will take you to the Power Query editor once again. And now if you see, all these buttons are enabled. Now, this was just one type of data that we imported. Power Query offers many other types of data which you can import. Now, if you see at this get data here, you can import a Excel file. You can import a Power BI semantic model from Power BI services. You can import a data flow, again Power BI services, Dataverse, SQL Server, and many others. So if you click on more, it will show you a plethora of data sources that you can select to fetch the data from. Now, obviously, we won't be able to get into all of these data sources, but I'll try to use at least couple of them, the most common ones, so that you get a hang of how to extract the data from that data source and then work on your transformations. Okay, so I'm going to cancel this out, go to the Power Query editor again, and now let's do some basic transformation. The first thing that I usually do is check the data type of the columns that are imported. Now you can check the data type by clicking on this small icon here. So every column will have this small section here at the top. So you can just select this or click on this and it will show you the different data types which are available. Right now it says ABC, which means this one is a text. Okay. So this is fine for me. Position class code, again it says 123, which is nothing but a whole number, and we are okay with that. Grade is ABC. Okay, this is also fine, because although these are numbers, but we also have few values which are alphanumeric. So I'm going to keep it as ABC only. The average of base salary, now this is a problem here. It says ABC, but we know that this is an average of salary, so it should be a number. So I'm going to click on this ABC here, and this should be a decimal number because it has decimal values in it. So I'm going to click on decimal numbers, and it's going to ask you whether you want to change the current data type. So you're going to click on replace current. The moment you click on that, you notice that it gives you an error. And the reason for that is because this column contains a character, a special character, which was the dollar sign. So if you remember, I told you that Power Query stores whatever steps you have taken in its memory, and then you can always go back to those steps to edit it or make changes, right? Now, this is where the bottom part of the Power Query editor comes into picture. So we have seen what the top ribbon does, but then in the bottom, you see these three sections, right? The left one is nothing but the table that we have just loaded or trying to transform, which says queries. The middle section is the preview of your data itself, and the right section has the applied steps button in it, which means all the steps that you apply in your transformation will be shown on this particular pane. Now, because we use this change data type step here, you see this change data type here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on this delete icon here, which is this red cross button. This will remove that step and the error has gone. Now, before we kind of convert this into number, what we have to do is we have to remove that dollar sign from this column. Select this, go to transform, and in this, you'll see this replace values. Click on that, and the value to find is dollar, and I'm going to replace it with nothing. Okay, don't enter anything here. There are a few advanced options here as well, but for now, we're going to keep it as it is and press OK. It has replaced those dollar sign with nothing. Now, let's try to change the data type again. I'm going to click on ABC here. And instead of ABC, I'm going to click on 1.2, which is decimal numbers. And now if you see, the error did not come because we have already removed those special characters, and Power Query did not find any problem in converting that text value into a number. Now, don't worry, we're going to get into the applied steps section more in detail because there are a lot of things to cover here. But in essence, this is how a transformation is done within Power Query Editor. Now, once you're done with your transformation and you're happy with it, go back to Home, click on this Close and Apply, and click on Close and Apply again. This will apply all those changes which you have done in your Power Query Editor and show you the final output onto the Power BI desktop data preview window. So with this, you have successfully completed the ETL process, which is extracted the data from your data source, transformed it, and then loaded it onto the Power BI desktop. And if you notice, the right side table contains all those columns. And if I go to the table view here, it contains that average of base salary in a number format. Now, once the data is loaded into Power BI and you've applied all those transformation steps, every month it's just a matter of clicking on this refresh button. And what this will do is it will go back to that original data source, fetch the new data in, apply all those transformation steps that you have applied in your Power Query Editor, and then give you the final output. Only caveat being the data source location does not change, and also the file name. If I click on refresh here, it's going to fetch that CSV file with that we imported, and because my CSV file location is the same and also the name of the file is the same, it has refreshed and then updated the values. Welcome to the module 2 of the Power Query series. In this module, we'll deep dive into the essential transformation tool that make Power Query so powerful. You'll learn how to clean, reshape, and organize your data, all without writing a single line of code. Okay, so now let's start from the very beginning. Because we're talking about transformation, obviously we would first import our data in. Now, in our previous module, we were using a CSV file to import the data. And as I indicated earlier, we will try to cover a couple of other data sources as well. So now, in this module, we're going to import our data from our SQL Server database. Okay. So again, I'm going to go to Get Data and click on SQL Server, or the SQL Server shortcut option is also available at the top here. So I can click this. In the prompt, it will ask you for the server name. Now, if you don't know what the server name is, when you open up your local instance of your SQL Server, it will show you the server name here at the top. And in case you want to copy it, you can just right click, go to properties, and from this, you can just copy this. One thing to note here is this is my local SQL Server instance. So your instance name would be different from mine. So don't get confused and don't try to copy this name because this will not work for you. Now I'm going to go back. In the server, I'm going to enter this server name. I'm going to keep this at import mode only. There is an option to provide the database name as well, but I'm going to keep it as blank and I'm going to select that from the next prompt window. So I'm going to click on OK here. It will show you a new pop-up window. Within this, it will show you the database name So BI is my database name. And if I open this up, it will show me a couple of the data that we're using for now is this crime data. Again, the link will be in the description. You can download the data from there. I'm going to check mark this crime data and I'm going to click on this transform data now. This will open up the Power Query window. So let me give you a quick highlight about this data. This is a crime data from a particular city within United States. It has a couple of information like when the crime happened, that is the date, the time, the area, and the type of crime which happened. It also contains a couple of information about victims, gender, victims' descent, and victims' age as well. We're going to apply some basic and advanced transformation steps on this data to create something useful. Now, the first transformation step that I apply while importing any data is to check the data type. This, I have already shown it in my previous module, but I'm going to show it again. So if you see at the top left, you have these small buttons. If you click on them, you will see a couple of other options, which are all other data types which are available within Power Query. You can just select any one of them and it will change the data type of that particular column. Now, let's see if any of these column has a wrong data type information. Now, if you see in this column, CRM underscore CD, which is nothing but a crime directory, the values are all numbers. However, the data type stored in this is ABC, which is a text value. And this sometimes happens because the column might contain few alphanumeric values or the column might contain null values. So that's why it is showing like this. But I want to convert this to a number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on ABC and click on whole number, and this will get converted into a number. Similarly, I'm going to check other columns, and if I find anything else which I want to change, I'm going to change that. Like for example, I have few of these columns which has the same information but is stored as a text, so I'm going to change these as well. So our basic data type transformation is done. Okay, so now the next type of transformation we're going to see is renaming your tables and columns. Now, when you import any data set within Power Query, the query section here at the left shows you the table which we are importing. Now, this also gives you the option to rename your table. Okay, if you right click and click on rename, you can change the name to something else. Let's say raw data. Now, if you notice, when I change the name of this query, raw data, the name at the right hand side property has also changed to raw data. Okay, so basically you can change a name from here, or you can also change a name from here. So if I change it from here, this will also change here. Okay, so I'm going to change it back to raw data itself, or else let's keep it as crime data. The next one is renaming your columns. Now again, because you're renaming columns, you can choose your column, right click, and this will give you an option to rename. So you can rename like this, or else you can also double click on the column header and it will open up the editing feature within that column header and you can rename from there. Now, if you go to the transform tab within the Power Query window, you will also see the same option in this tab as well. If you see, there's a rename here. And if you read the tooltip here, it says change the name of the currently selected column. So if I click on any one of them, click on rename, I can change it to anything I want. Now, if you notice one thing, the moment I changed anything in this preview window, the steps got applied onto the applied step. So if you see at the right hand side, just below the change type, there's a new step added, which is called renamed columns. And if you select this step, there's a formula bar just above this preview pane, which is this. It will show you what you have done. So in this, it says that date underscore RPTD is renamed to date underscore reported. There is another way to see what you have done in terms of steps, apart from this applied steps, is to go to home and then click on advanced editor here. This will show you all the steps that you have applied on a particular table. So this will show you right from the beginning where you have fetched the data from, which database, and then which table, and finally all the steps that you have applied on that particular table. So as I said before, everything that you do in Power Query is recorded, and at any point in time you can go back, reverse what you have done. So if I just click on this cut icon here, the step that I applied for renaming the column will be nullified. So if I click on this cross here, if you see now, the table header, the column header has been reverted back to the original state like it was before. Okay, moving on. The next transformation that we can do is removing a column. So let's say you have this huge data set here and you don't want all the columns to be present here, because you see the number of columns and number of rows that you keep within your Power Query table, that will decide how much load that you put on Power BI while you refresh your data set. So in case you feel all these columns are not required for your analysis, you can always remove them. So let's say I decide that I don't want this cross street column here. So what you can do is select the column, right click, and then click on remove. You can do this for multiple columns. So let's say I'm going to choose cross street and I'm going to choose this date OCC. And in order to select multiple columns, you simply press Control and then select all the columns. Now, once you've selected multiple columns or single column, just right click and click on remove column. And as you see, the step has also been added on the right hand side. The column has been removed, but in case you think that there was a mistake, you can just go ahead and cancel this out and the column will come back. Now, instead of removing columns, there is also an option to keep columns, which means, let's say you have 100 columns and you want to remove, let's say 95 of the columns and you want to keep only 5. So obviously you would not select 95 column one at a time. It's better to select those 5 columns and remove the other ones, right? So this is how you do it. Let's say you want date reported, you want area, you want area name, crime description, victim age, sex, descent, and status description. Okay. Once you've selected everything, just right click and click on remove other columns. This means whatever you have selected, apart from those columns, everything else will be removed. So in a sense, you're keeping only those columns which you have selected. Now I'm going to remove these steps, the remove other columns and the remove columns one, because we might need it for future transformation steps that we're going to learn. So I'm going to remove those steps. Now we have seen how to remove columns, but how will you remove rows? Removing rows simply means you're filtering out certain row items. So how do you do that? It's as simple as like you do it in Excel. Just click on this drop down button here and select whatever items you want. So in case I only want data for, let's say, 2020. So I'm going to do is date filter and between, select this calendar. So 1st January 2020 here and before or equal to 31st December 2020. And if I press OK, all the remaining rows will get filtered out. Now I showed you how you can filter a row based on the date selection here. But if it's a text column or a number column, the options are a bit different. So if you select a number column here, you will have a number filter and you can choose equal to, greater than, less than, and all those things. And if it's a text, then it will give you a text filter and it will contain equal, does not equal, begins with, ends with, contains, etc. Okay. So again, based on the data type of the column, you'll receive these options. You can choose any option you want. Okay, so now the next transformation is sorting your rows. So it is possible for you to sort any of these row items based on any of these column headers. So let's say, for example, I want to sort it by date reported. So just click on this column here and sort from the top here to ascending or descending, and it will sort everything accordingly. And remember, you can apply a sorting on multiple columns. So you have applied a sorting on this date reported, and let's say now you want to sort it by victim age. So I'm going to click on this and sort ascending. So what this will do is it will sort the data based on those two columns. And you can see that in this formula bar here. It has applied both the sorting in one single step. All right, moving on. The next transformation is splitting a column. In this crime description column, I want to split anything which has a hyphen sign in between. So for example, I want the theft plain in one column and the crime itself on the second column. So again, select this column, go to transform, and within this you will find this split. When you click on this split column, it will show you multiple options. Now, because we already have a delimiter in place, which is this hyphen sign, and we want to split it based on that, I'm going to select this delimiter. But you can also split it on the basis of number of characters and also by a position. Or you can also split it by lowercase to uppercase, uppercase to lowercase, digit to non-digit, non-digit to digit. But in my experience and opinion, the bottom ones are rarely used. You would mostly use either delimiter or number of characters or position. So I'm going to use delimiter right now, delimiter, and the delimiter is custom here. So there are some predefined delimiters here, which is comma, colon, equal sign, and etc. But because we are using a hyphen, this is a custom. And in the split at section, there are again few options. The first option says leftmost delimiter. So whatever it finds from the left hand side first, it will split it and stop it at there. Or rightmost delimiter. From right, it will start counting. Wherever it found that hyphen sign, it will separate it and then stop the delimiting. Or you can do each occurrence of the delimiter. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to choose this rightmost delimiter. Rest of the options you can keep as it is, don't change anything. And then finally, click on OK. Now, if you see, it has converted that one column into two columns, and it has splitted the hyphen sign checking from the right hand side. Now, you must notice that the column which has been splitted has a space before the actual word. This is because when we split it on the basis of hyphen. But after the hyphen, there was a space, right? And we would want to remove that. So this is the next transformation step. You select the column and you apply trim function. So what trim does is, wherever it finds unnecessary spaces, it will remove it. So I'm going to select this column. Again, in the transform, go to format and click on this trim. And if you see, it has now removed that leading space which was there for each of the values in this column. All right, moving on. Now, opposite to splitting a column, there's also merging columns. So you can club two columns together. Again, let's see that with an example. So let's take these two columns again as an example here. So I'm going to select these two columns, and at the top, you'll see this merge column button in the transform tab. Click on that. Now it's asking for a separator. Obviously, this separator is needed because if you don't provide a separator, then it will club everything together and you would not be able to identify which came from the first column and which came from the second column. So I'm going to choose, let's say, a colon, because the earlier delimiter was a hyphen. Now I'm choosing a colon, and it will create a new column. So you can choose any name you want. So CRM merged and press OK. And now if you see, it has created that new column, merging both of these earlier columns together. Then finally, you can also reorder your columns, because let's say you have this CRM CD1, CRM CD2, 3 and 4 column here, but you also have a CRM CD column here. You want all of these columns to be together. So in order for you to reorder these, just click on the column you want to reorder and just drag it like this, and then drop it wherever you want. So I want it just before the CRM CD1. So I've placed it there. And if you see at the right hand side, it has added that new step, which is the reordered column. And if I open up this formula bar, it will show you the exact order as well. So the good thing here is, if you want, you can change the order using this formula bar as well now. So instead of dragging that column manually from here, you can just change the value here and it will be changed. So let's say the CRM CD, instead of placing it here, you want it to be placed after CRM CD4. Okay. And click on this tick icon. Now, if you see, the reordering has happened again, and now CRM CD is at the end. Welcome to part 3 of our Power Query series, Data Shaping Techniques. In this session, we'll explore few advanced and essential tools to clean and reshape your data. From grouping and pivoting to transposing, replacing values, and filling missing data, these tools help you take raw, imperfect dataset and mold them into structured format perfect for analysis. Now, before we start, the first thing is obviously to import the data in. As we did for previous modules, I'm going to try a new dataset import method. We're going to use a Power BI dataset as a data for this process. Now, what I mean by Power BI dataset is that when you publish a Power BI report onto Power BI services, it automatically creates two layers for the report. One is obviously the visual of the report, the front end layer, and then there is also a semantic model layer which contains all the data set in. Power BI gives us an option to use that semantic model as your data source as well. Now, let me give you a quick example. So I'm going to open app.powerbi.com. So when you open Power BI services or app.powerbi.com, this is something that you usually see in your home page. Now within this, you will see a lot of tabs on the left side here. I will go to the workspaces and I'll choose this workspace which I created earlier, which is called tutorial. And within this, you'll see many reports which I have already published onto services. But one thing to note here is every report that you see here is connected to a semantic model. And when you publish a report, this is what you actually publish onto the services, a report layer and also the semantic model. And before this, you will obviously see the data source, which is fetching data for that particular semantic model. So in this case, all of these are fetching information from my local instance of SQL Server. Now, in order to publish your dataset onto Power BI services, there are two main ways. First one is you open a Power BI desktop, you import the data into the Power BI desktop, hit the publish button, and before you hit the publish button, you would obviously need to log in into Power BI. So I've already logged in with my Microsoft account. And then once I load in the data, I can hit on publish, select the workspace where I want to publish, and then publish. That will show you the dataset on your workspace within Power BI services. The second way is to use something called as a Dataflow. Dataflow is a pipeline which you can use to fetch information or data from any of your data sources and load it directly onto Power BI services without ever going into Power BI desktop. Now, if you want to see how a data flow is created, I've created a detailed video on how to do it. The link will be in the description. You can just check it out. To keep things simple for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the first method, which is I'm going to use a data set, import it into this Power BI desktop, load it back to the Power BI services. So the dataset that we are using today is a simple dataset because we are covering some advanced topics. I wanted to keep the dataset simple so that you understand the concepts easily. So I'll just show you the dataset here. I have a CSV file here, and in this you have sales of different types of coffee for a particular company. Okay, so we're going to use this dataset into our Power BI desktop first. So I'm going to say get data, click on text CSV, choose your source. That will load up the data into Power BI. And before you click on load, I want to just click on transform first. So transform. Now here in the transform tab, I want to show you quick two things which you should know while transforming a dataset. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these two steps which Power BI automatically added, which is change type and promote headers. Okay. Now, sometimes what happens is when you load up the data, it will show you the data like this, which means the header row is not considered as a header. Automatically, Power BI assigns a default header name to each of the columns, which is obviously wrong. In order for you to consider your first row as a header, there's an option within Transform, within this small button here. You click here, you will see the second option which says use first row as header. If you click that, that will promote your first row as a header, and now that default column name which Power BI assigned has been removed. The second thing is obviously the data type. The sales column is fine. It says 123, which means it's a number. We are okay with that. Category, coffee name, coffee code, day, month, all are fine. But this date is also saying ABC, which is wrong. We would like to convert this into a date. So when you click on this ABC here, it will show you the option. If you select date, and we're going to say replace current, if you notice, the top ones are converted perfectly, but the bottom ones are giving an error. If you click on the error, it will show you that we could not pass the input provided as a date value. And the value is 1/13/2024. Now in this particular case, I know exactly why this is coming up. That is because in my local system setting, the date format is set as DDMMYY. However, in the data set, the value which was inputted is in a MMDDYY format, which is in English US. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to remove this step here, and I'm also going to remove this change type. Now there's a quick way to change your data type setting to your local system setting. That is by clicking on this ABC again, and within this click on using locale. You select the data type here, which is date, and instead of using English your location, choose English US. Now once you choose that, it will show you a sample input values. You press on OK, and now there are no errors coming up on this date column. Now because we removed that change type, we need to add one more data type change, which is on this sales column. It now says ABC. I'm going to click here and click on 123. That will change it to a whole number. You can change this coffee code as well. And now all of the columns are formatted properly in terms of data type. I'm going to click on close and apply. Once the data is loaded, and once you ensure that you're logged into Power BI, just click on publish, save the file. Let's save it as coffee sales data. And for publishing, I'm going to choose this tutorial workspace. Obviously, in your case, you might have a different workspace name. Choose that and press and select. And this will be published onto the Power BI services. Now remember, in order for you to do this, you need to have a pro or a premium Power BI license. You would not be able to do this on a free license. Okay. So now once you published, and if you go back to the Power BI services, you will see that the new data that we publish is here now, and it also published a report layer, but this report layer is empty. So if I open this report here, this does not contain any visuals. Now we can close this Power BI desktop file, and we have opened up a blank Power BI file again. Now remember, the only reason we created that earlier Power BI file was to just upload our data onto the services. In case you don't want to do it like this, you can create a data flow, and that way you would not have to come to Power BI desktop to publish your data. Every time when you create a data flow, you can just directly connect your data source onto the data flow and apply a auto refresh, so that at every given interval, the data gets updated from your source file. Now, I'm going to click on this get data, and if you see, there's an option called Power BI semantic model. I'm going to click on this. Now, since you have published your data onto the workspace, you will see that new data here. So I'm going to click on coffee sales data and connect. Okay, so now the first transformation technique that we're going to learn is called grouping. Grouping can be used in Power Query for summarizing and organizing your large data set. But when you look at this Power BI file, you will observe that there are few things missing in this file. For example, if you look at the left bar here, usually in Power BI you have 4 tabs, but here we only have report view, model view, and DAX query view. You're missing the tabular view. And if you click on this transform data and try to go to Power Query by clicking on this transform data again, it will give you a small prompt which says a direct query connection is required. The meaning of this is, because our data source is located inside Power BI services, we cannot transform your data from your local file, which is just a connection. The actual semantic model exists on the cloud. So you would not be able to make changes using an external file. Now there are 2 ways to do it. First one, you go to Power BI services and make few very basic changes, but that is very limited. The second option is that when you're uploading your data onto Power BI services, you perform all your transformations. Or else, when you're creating a data flow, at that stage, it also gives us many options to transform your data. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to open the earlier Power BI file, which was the coffee sales data, so that we can perform our transformations there and upload it back to Power BI services. So I'm going to close this file and open up that other Power BI file. Okay, perfect. So now I have this original file where we loaded this data. And now in this, if you see, we have all those 4 tabs. And if I click on transform data here, this will take you to the Power Query editor. And it also contains all the steps that we applied initially. Now let's see how we can apply grouping onto this data. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to touch the original data here because I might need this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here in the query section here and right click on the original table, which is coffee sales, and I'm going to click on duplicate. What this will do is this will create a duplicate of your original data set with all the steps already applied. But there's a catch here. When you create a duplicate, it consumes more resources because you're essentially storing the same data again in your Power Query editor. So usually what I do is instead of doing a duplicate, so I'm going to delete this and go to the original data once more, right click, and instead of a duplicate, I usually use this reference. Now what reference does it uses that original data set as a reference point. So whatever transformations you have to apply on this original data set, the steps will automatically get applied on this one. But then in addition to that, you can add some other transformations. And since this is just a reference, it does not consume that much resources. So I'm going to rename this. All right. Now, once you're renamed, what I want to do is I want to create a summary of this entire data set based on the months that are available. So I want the months column, and then I want to see the total sales count for that particular month. I'm going to click on this month, go to transform, and within this, you'll find this button which says group by. Click there. And now it's giving you a couple of options. So since we already selected the month column on which we want to group the data, it has already selected that here. If you want to change that, you can just click on this drop down and change the selection. It gives you an option to select a new column name. So this will be total sales count. Operation is instead of count rows, I want to sum, and the column that I want to sum is the sales column. And I can press OK. Now, if you see, this data set has been grouped together and it's showing me month-wise total sales count for all the months which are available. Now let's do something else. So I'm going to go back to the original data set here, right click, reference. I'm going to rename this as grouped 2. This time, again, I'm going to select month, click on group by. Now within this, you have an advanced option as well. So I'm going to click on this radio button, advanced. Now inside advanced, you get an option to add more than one column, which will be used to group your data. So I'm going to use the month column, but along with month, I also want the coffee name column as my second level of grouping. So I'm going to add a grouping and select coffee name. Again, let's say total sales. Operation is sum, but as you see, you can choose from any of these operations: average, median, minimum, maximum, count distinct rows, and all rows as well. For now, I'm going to use the sum, use the sales column again. I can add one more aggregation here. So let's say add aggregation. In this, I'm going to use an average sales. Select the average, again sales column, and that is it. Now press OK. Now what this will do is it will club or group my data on the basis of month and coffee name. So each month would have all the coffee names which are available, and within those coffee names, you'll have the total sales for each of those coffee and also the average sales. Now within this, you also have an option to choose all rows instead of choosing an aggregation. So for example, I'm going to right click, choose a reference, go to group by, and instead of using this count rows, I'm going to say all rows. I'm going to press OK. What this does is it creates a nested table within itself. So now, as you see, it says group rows here. I can choose to expand those columns. So if I click on this small button here, it will give you an option to select whatever columns you need. Let's say coffee code and coffee name within each month, and press OK. It will expand for those two columns. And now you have a table with the month, coffee code, and coffee name within it. This can be used for creating a mapping table or some kind of lookup table if you want. Next, let's dive into pivoting and unpivoting. Now, this is a transformation technique which is used when your data is too wide or too tall. What do I mean by that? So for example, let's say this data is scattered into multiple rows, and I want to create a data which is scattered across columns. So for example, this coffee name, I want all the coffee names to be a column header, not a row value. So Cappuccino will be a column header, espresso will be another column header, and within that, it will show me the sales value for each of those coffee names. In order for us to do that, we need to pivot this data, right? This is similar to what we do in Excel, the Excel pivots. So I'm going to select this coffee name, and in Transform tab, you can see this option which says pivot column. Select that. It will ask you the value columns, which will be used alongside the coffee name column to pivot the entire data. So the value column is obviously the sales. There are a few advanced options here as well. You can choose some aggregation values. I'm going to keep this as default and I'm going to press OK. Now, if you see what it did was it converted that row level data into a column level data. Now, each of those rows which had those coffee names has been converted into these column headers. Now, one thing to notice here is the coffee name was associated with each coffee code. So now this column does not make any sense. So you can either remove this or club this along with your coffee name column and pivot that column instead. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to cancel out this pivot column here. Let's create a new column. In order for us to create a new column, you can click on Add Column. Select these two columns and then in the Add Column tab, click on Merge Columns. The first option here is a separator. So you would have to choose a separator which will actually be used while clubbing these two columns. So for me, I can choose any one of these separators here, or you can choose a custom one. So I'm going to choose a custom and press underscore. You can also give a column name for the new column. So let's say coffee underscore pivot and press OK. Now, if you see the new column has been created here. Now I can safely remove these columns because these are not required. And now I can follow the same process as earlier. Selected this column, go to transform and pivot. The value column is sales. The aggregation for sales is set at sum and I'm going to keep it that way and press OK. Now, if you see the coffee column has been pivoted along with that coffee code. Now let's talk about unpivoting a column. Unpivoting is the exact opposite of what we just did. So if your data is in a wide format and you want to convert that into a tall format, as in into row level data, then you can use an unpivot column. So I'm going to use the same example. So I'm going to select all these columns here. And then I'm going to click on this drop down which says unpivot column within the transform tab. There are multiple options: unpivot columns, unpivot other columns, or unpivot only selected columns. So in our case, this is what we're going to choose. So we only want to unpivot these columns. So I'm going to click here. And now what it did was it converted those columns into a row level data once again. Now, in a real world scenario, such transformation using pivoting and unpivoting can help normalize the overall data set for better analysis. Now let's talk about transposing, which means flipping rows into columns and vice versa. Now, why and when will you use this? You might use this when your data is structured with headers in row instead of columns, which is not ideal for analysis. Now let's take a smaller data set for this because I want you to see what's happening. So I'm going to take this coffee sales grouped, reference this again, and I'm going to rename this to Transpose. And within this, I'm not going to choose all the months. Let's choose only a couple of them. So January, February, and March is fine. Okay. So now we have 3 months and corresponding sales count for those months. Now what I'm going to do is in the Transform tab, there's a button called Transpose. So I'm going to click that. What this will do is it will convert my rows into columns. So earlier, if you remember, these months were inside rows, but now these are in columns. But this data is not accurate because I want the months to be my column headers, not row values. In this, what happened was because it converted into columns, Power BI automatically assigned a default column headers here. Now I've already shown you how you can rectify this. There's a small button here, click there, and in the second option, it says use first row as header. So I'm going to use this and instantly that row item gets converted into header. Now, while doing transpose, it is essential that you check null values because at times it happens that there are a lot of null values because the original row has inconsistent length. So be very cautious about that. Next, let's talk about replacing values. You've already seen this earlier when we started this series, but I'm going to show this to you again. So I'm going to click on this table again and click on reference. Replace helps you to do is exactly what it says. It helps you replace a certain value with another. So if I click on this column here, and in Transform tab, there's an option called Replace Values. If you open up the drop down, you'll see Replace Values and Replace Errors. So if your dataset has some errors in it, then you can use this option to convert that error into something else. But this dataset does not have any error. So I'm going to click on Replace Values. It's giving you an option, value to find and replace with. So what value do you want to find? So let's say I want to find latte, and then I want to replace it with something else. Let's say mocha. Now there are a few advanced options as well. So if you click on that, it says match entire cell content. So what this will do is it will match your cell entire content, and if it matches with this, then only it will replace. And the second option is replace using special characters. So if I turn this on, it gives you an option to find these special characters and replace the value based on that. So if I select any one of them, let's say line feed, it will add this special character here and it will search that, and then wherever it finds that, it will replace it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, keep this at basic level here, and click on OK. And what this will do is it will convert all those values where the coffee name was latte to mocha. Remember, replace is case sensitive. So if I click on replace values again, and instead of mocha with a capital M, I write MOCHA with a small letter and replace it with latte back again, press OK, then nothing will happen because Power Query treats mocha with a capital M and mocha with a small m differently. Alright, perfect. Now let's move on. Finally, we're talking about fill up and fill down. Now this option is super useful when working with hierarchical or survey data, which means your dataset contains only the first row of a group and then the below rows are empty. You want the first row value to be filled in below rows. Or let's say you want the value of your last row to be filled upwards. We'll see that with an example. So to show you this, I'm going to use again a reference of this main table, and let's rename this again. And instead of using all these columns, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select coffee name and sales column, right click and click on remove other columns. What this will do is this will remove all other columns which are not selected. This will leave you with these two columns. I'm doing all these steps just so that I can create a scenario where you require fill up and fill down, which means in your data set, you might not have to do these steps which I'm doing right now. I'm going to just replace the latte values with a null value. So I said null, not a blank. Both are different. So if I leave it blank and press OK, the fill up and fill down will not work. It needs a null value. For example, when you're loading your data in from an Excel file or any data source and the value is null there, it will show something like this in your Power Query. But if you leave it blank, then the fill up and fill down will not work. Please keep this in mind. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on fill button here within the transform tab, and I'm going to click on down, because what I want to do is I want to copy whatever value is there above the null value. So in this case, I want cold brew. In this case, I want cappuccino, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to click on this fill and press on down. And as you see, all the values from the above cell has been copied onto that null value. You can also do this for fill up. So I'm going to remove this step here. We're back at null values. Click on fill, and instead of down, I'm going to click on up. Now what this will do is it will copy whatever value was below that null value into that cell. So I'm going to click on up. So now that null value has been replaced with the value which was below it. For example, here it says iced Americano instead of cold brew. In Power Query, creating new columns isn't just about adding data. It's about adding intelligence. In this module, you will learn how to write custom formulas using MCode, apply powerful if-then-else logic, build UI-driven conditional columns, and generate index columns to support ranking, joins, and more. This is where your data becomes dynamic, insightful, and ready for analysis. So before we begin, as I've been doing in previous modules, I'm going to show you a new method of importing your data inside Power BI. We're going to import the data from SQL Server, but I'm going to use something which is called as a direct mode query. Now, before I get into that, let me just quickly show you the data. So in my SQL Server, this is the table that we have, which is e-sales data. This data contains few electronic items and their sales with some details about customers and the region where that sale happened. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go back to Power BI. So I've opened up a blank Power BI window here. I'm going to go to this get data, and within this I'm going to select SQL Server. Now you must have observed this earlier as well. It will ask you for the server name obviously, but then in the data connectivity mode, by default it's selecting import. But now we're using the second option, which is called direct query. Now before I get into direct query, I would like to quickly explain 3 different modes that we have in Power BI while importing a data in. The first one is obviously the import mode. Now what this does is it creates a copy of your source data into the Power BI ecosystem. So which means the data is copied into Power BI and stored in data model. The advantage of this is the query runs faster because the data is local, and performance wise is obviously a superior option for us. And from a Power Query and DAX perspective, every available feature is supported with this mode. Now the next one is something called as a live connection. You won't explicitly see that option here, but if you remember in the last module, we used a live connection between this Power BI and the cloud Power BI dataset. So if I cancel this out and go to get data and click on this Power BI semantic model, it will show you the dataset which is available on the cloud. You can select any one of them. But the problem with this is you can't use Power Query with this method, because when we select that, the transform data option does not work for you. The transformation needs to happen before we actually import it inside a Power BI for visualization. So that is the limitation of a live connection. But obviously, because it's based on cloud, the benefit is that multiple users can access the same dataset without creating redundant or duplicate dataset in each local version. Now the third option is direct query mode. So I'm going to go back to get data and click on SQL Server. And this is the option that we're going to use today. Now what is this? In this method, Power BI doesn't store the data locally. It runs a query directly on the source system. In this case, it will run a query on SQL Server. Now data is always up to date, but the performance depends on the source system. So if your SQL Server is slow, then this will also be so. And also in this case, some of the Power Query and DAX features are limited. I'll paste a link in the description so that you can go ahead and read about the limitations that you have when you're using direct query. For now, what we're going to do is I'm going to click on this server, copy paste my server name from SQL Server. So I've shown you how to do that. Go to your SQL Server instance, click on the server name here, properties, and then you can copy it from here. Obviously, remember your server name will be different from mine. So I'm going to copy paste this. Database, this is optional, but I'm going to just enter the database name. My database name is called BI. So BI here. Then the option is obviously the data connectivity mode, which is direct query. Now there are a few advanced options. We're going to get into this now. Both with import and direct query mode, you get an option to write a SQL statement so that you can fetch records from your backend database based on your requirements. You don't have to pull in everything at once, okay? So this option is available for both import and direct query mode. So let's say I write a SQL statement here. So I'm going to say where quantity column. So I have a quantity column in that table, this one. I want all the rows where the quantity is greater than 1, okay? So I'm going to say quantity greater than 1 and press OK. Now what it will do is it will use this SQL statement to fetch only those records from the database which fulfills that where clause that I've written. So in this case, it has given me only those row items where the quantity was greater than 1. Now I'm going to click on this transform data here so that we can start with the Power Query transformation techniques, which we are going to cover in this module. So let's go. Alright, so now we are in the Power Query window. The first thing that we're going to learn is how to create custom columns using manual formula entry. Now, what do I mean by that? So for example, let's say you want to create or you want to add a new column onto this data to identify total sales value after you have applied the discount. So which means the total sales will be quantity column multiplied by unit price, and then we're going to subtract the discounted value from that final price. So all you have to do is go to this add column tab here and click on custom column. Let's name this as total sales, and then just click on this custom column formula section here, and then first add the quantity column. So just double click on this quantity column from this section, add a multiplication sign, and then add the unit price by double clicking. Now obviously we have to minus the discounted amount from this final price. In order to do that, if you notice, this discount amount is in decimal values, but in essence this is actually a percentage. So this 0.15 is nothing but 15%, this 0.05 is nothing but 5%, and so on and so forth. So which means we would have to subtract this value from 100% to get our final sales value, and then we'll multiply that percentage value with this calculation. So I'm going to add a multiplication sign again. Due to BODMAS rules, I'm going to enter my next formula inside a bracket. So I'm going to say 1 minus the discount column. So double click there, close the bracket, and your formula is completed. Press OK. It will give you a new column here which says total sales. But the moment you apply this, you'll get a warning message at the top. It says this step results in a query that is not supported in direct query mode, which means what we're trying to do here is not supported in direct query mode. And this is exactly what I wanted to show you when we use direct query. So in direct query, there are certain limitations which you would face while using Power Query. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our main window without saving this. And I'm going to click on discard changes. Instead, this time we'll use an import query mode. So I'm going to paste my server name here. The database name is BI. And then in this data connectivity mode, I'm going to choose import so that all the data gets imported inside Power BI. And in the advanced option, I can write my SQL query again. And click on OK here. This will show you the preview again. Click on transform data. And now let's create that column once more. So add column, custom column, total sales, quantity multiplied by unit price, and then that amount multiplied by 1 minus discount amount. So which means if the discount was 15%, 1 minus 15%, which is 100 minus 15%, would be 85%. And that 85% will be multiplied with this calculation to give you the final total sales value after discount. So I'm going to click on OK. And as you see, now there is no error at the top. The column has also been created. Now, once you've created the column, feel free to change the data type as well. So I'm going to choose this decimal number here. Now, this was a simple calculation. What if you want to add a little bit of complexity in your calculation? Like for example, if, then, and else conditions. So let's see how to do that. So I'm going to insert a new column again. Let's name this as sales category. What we're trying to do here is the new column that we created, which is total sales. We are going to use that column and we're going to check if total sales is greater than 3000, then high, else if total sales is greater than 1500, then medium, else low. So how do we write that condition? It's as simple as writing English. So if total sales is greater than 3000, then give me high, else if total sales is greater than 1500, then give me medium, else give me low, and that's it, and press OK. So if you see now, this new column has been created. Now let's look at another example where we will see how to work with dates. Let's use these sales date and delivery date to identify the number of days between the sales and the delivery. So to do that, again, go to add column, custom column. I'm going to name this delivery time days. Now in the formula section, we're going to use an inbuilt days function, which is there in Power Query. It's called duration.days. Open the bracket and let's say delivery date minus the sales date. Press OK. And now it's going to show us the number of days which took between sales and the final delivery. Now let's quickly look at a text manipulation technique in this. So let's say you want to identify, along with this customer name, you want to see what's the location of the customer. So we're going to use this customer name column and we're going to use this region column to create a new column which will have both. So custom column and customer location, and in the formula bar I'm going to use the customer name ampersand sign. Now we use ampersand sign to concatenate two different strings or two different columns. I'm going to use something like this. So I need the customer name and within brackets I need the region. So I'll enter a bracket inside the double quotes so that it knows that this is a text string, and again an ampersand sign. This time I'm going to use the region column, again an ampersand sign, double quotes, and within that I'm going to close the brackets and press OK. Now if you see, it has created that column with the name of the customer and the region that customer comes from. Alright, so now you've already seen how to create a column using manual formula entries. Let's see how to create a conditional column using UI-driven features within Power Query. So in the Add Column section again, there's a button which will say Conditional Columns. Click on that, and this will provide you with a UI interface to apply your condition instead of writing them down. So let's say you want to create a bucket or a flag which will tell you which region is in priority and which region is in not priority. So let's say column name would be region priority, and in the condition I'm going to say if column. So now the if is already applied here. Now column name you can choose from the drop down. So in the drop down you will find all these columns. So I'm going to say if region is equal to, but there are other operators as well, but we need equals to only. So I'm going to keep it that way. But in case you want something else, you have does not equal, begin with, and many more. Now for this, we'll just use equals. The value would be west and the output would be priority. Add one more clause here. So click on this button. Now automatically it has added an else if block here. Now within this again, select region equals east, then standard. Now finally in the else block, which is at the bottom here, I'm going to write normal. Press OK. Now it has created that new column. Now whenever you create these columns and you want to edit any particular filter or any particular clause that you've added, you can always go back by clicking on this gear icon here. This will show that prompt once again and you can change it whatever you want. I'm going to show you this same conditional column and apply a condition using a number column. Let's use this discount column here. So I'm going to click on conditional column. I'm going to add a discount flag. Okay. So discount flag. If column name, which is discount, is greater than. So now because this is a number column, it is giving me slightly different options in the operators. Instead of having does not contain or contains, it contains equal to, does not equal to, greater than, less than. So now we need a greater than sign. So I'm going to choose this operator and I'm going to say if greater than 0, then give me yes, else give me no. And I'm going to press OK here. It has added that new flag with appropriate tagging. So which means when you're using conditional columns, there is no formula needed. Power Query UI handles all of it. But only caveat being the custom column is much more flexible and you can incorporate many more functions which are already inbuilt into Power Query to make it more powerful. Okay, so the next section is indexing columns. Now before we get into indexing columns, I want to quickly explain why do we need indexes. Although there are many benefits of having an index in your table, but the main advantages are you can create a unique identifier for each row if it does not already have it. If you want to rank your records, then it is very easy if you have an index. And then obviously, if you want to reorder your data, sorting, filtering, or merging, indexing ensures you can always restore the original row order whenever you want. So now let's quickly understand how you can add an index to your table. So in the add column section again, there is this button which says index column and there is a drop down as well. If you click on the drop down, it says from 0, from 1 and then custom. So you have all three options. You can say that your row 1 is actually starting from 0 or it can start from 1, or you can also give it a custom index as well. starting from a specified value with a specified increment level. So let's check how it's done. I'm going to click on the 0 here. And if you see the first row, it has created as 0 and then started with all the numbers. Let's check for 1. It has created another index and this time it has started from 1. Now let's enter a custom one. So I'm going to click on this index column again, click on custom, and I'm going to say the starting index is 10 and I want an increment of 5. Okay, so it will start your value from 10 and then it will add 5 onto each row. So let's press OK. And if you see, it has now created the same thing, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. But remember, keep only one index column in your table, otherwise it will unnecessarily slow down your table. This is where Power Query gets truly powerful. In section 5, we go beyond basic transformations to explore advanced tools that make your data dynamic, automated, and error resistant. You learn how to use parameters, join, and append tables, write MCode, and handle errors with precision. These skills are essential for building scalable, reusable Power BI solutions. Imagine being able to change your file path, filter data by region, or toggle between columns, all without editing your queries again and again. That's the power of parameters in Power Query. In this part, you'll learn how to build reusable dynamic queries that respond to your inputs. What are parameters? Parameters are user-defined inputs in Power Query. You can use them to dynamically control file paths, filters, column selections, or any value in MCode. Now we're going to see examples of each of these pointers in detail now. Let's begin with creating a parameter for dynamic file paths. On my desktop here, you can see these two folders. Each folder contains a dataset which is in a CSV format, and the data is ECS data advanced, and that other folder contains the same data. It's just that the name of the folder and the name of the file is different. I'm going to open up a Power BI desktop window here. So before we create that parameter to make the file path dynamic, let me first import the data into Power BI. So I'm going to go to get data, text CSV, and on my desktop there's this folder 1 and I'm going to choose this file, open. And now in this preview window, I'm going to click on transform data. Now once you are in the Power Query, as you see, if I click on the source, it's telling you that this is the file path that I've chosen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this file path, and remember not to copy the double quotes. I only need the file path. And then inside the home tab itself, you'll see this manage parameters. Click on that and then click on new parameter. Let's name our parameter as file path. And in the current value, I'm going to paste in that location. Press OK. So now if you see, there is this new parameter created and it has this value in it. And the name of that parameter is file path. Now come back to eSales data again, go to source, and instead of this entire string, I'm going to write file path. Okay. Now if you see, everything is working perfectly fine. Now let's close and apply. Okay. So everything is working. And if you see, the data has been loaded here. Now let's go back to the Power Query window again. And this time, instead of using folder 1, I want Power Query to use folder 2 without ever touching the actual query. Now this is helpful because right now we only have one query here. What if you have, let's say, 20 different queries and every query is referring to a different data source and you particularly don't want to make any changes to the actual query itself. So I'm going to go to this file path here, and in this, I'm going to just change this folder 1 to folder 2 because that was my folder name. And also my file name was eSales data advanced 1, and that's it. And if I go back to my eSales advanced, now because the file path was dynamic and we're using this parameter here, it has automatically accommodated that new data source. Now remember, both my dataset contain same columns. So in case your data structure is different than your previous data structure and you have certain Power Query steps which applies or uses certain columns or certain structure, then this might create a problem. So ensure that if you're changing the folder path or you're changing the source file, ensure your structure is the same. All right, so now let's look at the second use case of parameters, which is filtering your data. So I'm going to go to this manage parameters again. Click on new parameters. And inside this, I'm going to create a new parameter by the name of selected region. And the required data type for this is a text. In the suggested value section, instead of any values, I'm going to choose list of values. Now it will show me a grid. I'm going to enter few values into it. So north, and press enter. It will go to the next row. South, east, and west. I'm going to leave this default value as blank. And in the current value section, I'm going to choose east. Now, because we have these items in the grid here, it will show all those items in the drop down. So I've chosen east here and press OK. So now it has created that new parameter. Go to the table, and inside this, the region column, I'm going to apply a filter on this column now. So open this drop down here, click on text filters and click on equals. Now in this, if you see, this drop down already shows you all those items that we added in the parameter, but that's not what we want. We want to make this filter dynamic. So what you do is click on this ABC button here. It is a drop down, and instead of ABC text, I'm going to choose this parameter. Now you can choose a parameter within this filter. So it's showing a file path, but we are using this selected region here, and press OK. Your data will be filtered based on the new parameter that you created. Now this filter is dynamic. Again, if you have multiple tables and you want to apply the same filter on all the tables, this is a good way to do it. Just create one parameter, and the moment you change anything, everything on the data filter will get changed automatically like this. Okay, so now let's look at the third use case of parameters, which is controlling your attributes within Advanced Editor. And in this case, we will specifically control the column selection part of Advanced Editor. So this is what I mean. For example, I have this region column. If I right click on this region column, there are a couple of options which comes in. So let's say I'm going to choose this remove other columns. What this will do is it will keep the region column and remove everything else. Now, if you go to the Advanced Editor, which you can do by clicking on this Advanced Editor button here, this shows you the backend code which Power Query applies when you apply certain steps onto the data. Now, in this, the last step says remove other columns. This is what we applied at the very end, and it says table.select columns and filter rows, which was the previous step. Then it's telling you which column you want to keep and which you want to remove. So in this case, because we chose remove other columns, it has removed everything else apart from region. Now we can use parameter inside this as well. So let me show you how. Click on manage parameters again and click on new parameter. In this, let's give it a name, selected column. The required is a text again. Suggested value, a list of values. Let's say product, quantity, and region. I'm going to leave default value as blank, and the current value, I'm going to keep it at region. Press OK. Now it has created that parameter. I'm going to go back to the data, and now click on Advanced Editor again. And within this last step, I'm going to just remove this region from here. Instead, I'm going to choose that new parameter, which is selected column. Now remember, when the region was written, it was written inside double quotes, something like this. But now, because this is a parameter, we don't need double quotes anymore. Press OK. The data still works. I'm going to go back to the parameter again. Let's choose something else, product. And now the column selection is product, not region. Let's change it again to quantity. Go back, and now the column is quantity. Now this can be really powerful because now you're playing with Advanced Editor, and there are multiple attributes that you can change using parameters. So which means anything that you see here within double quotes can be replaced with a parameter. We're going to learn a concept called merge. Now, merging is a way to combine rows from two tables based on common columns, similar to joins in SQL or relationship in the Power BI model view. Now, you can choose between inner, left outer, right outer, full outer, left anti, and right anti. Now, we will see what all these means, but first, let's just import the data in so that we can use the merge functionality. Because to use merge, we need at least 2 tables so that we can merge both of them together. I'm going to load another data set. So we already have this e-sales data advanced. I'm going to load in a customer detail table, and it's stored in the same folder where we have that e-sales advanced data. So I'm going to open up this data here. It has 4 columns: customer ID, customer name, region, and segment. And if you remember, our e-sales advanced data also has a customer ID column. This is very important because in order for us to merge something, we need to have a common column between both of them. Let's first import this data in. So I'm going to say new source and CSV and then customer detail. It's going to give you a preview. I'm going to say OK, and it has loaded this. But if you notice, the header is not loaded properly. In order for the Power Query to consider first row as the header, we need to click on this small button here and click on use first row as header. And now the header has considered properly. For the e-sales data, because we have done so many things on this, it's only showing quantity here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and click on duplicate. Okay. So that all the steps that we applied here on this e-sales advanced table, it remains. Let's call this as new, and I'm going to remove these steps. Now let's merge these 2 tables together. So I'm going to click on this first table, which is e-sales advanced. I'm going to keep this as my primary table, and I'm going to go to this merge query here. In the home tab, you'll find this merge query, and then within this, if you open up the drop down here, you'll see merge query and merge queries as new. What merge query does is it will merge your second table data into the main table. The merge query as new, it will merge both of these tables and create a new table. So let's create a new table. Okay. So I'm going to click on merge query as new. I'm going to choose the second table from this drop down, which is customer detail. Now we have to select a column which is matching between both tables. So in this case, customer ID is the one. So I'm going to select customer ID from this and left click customer ID from this as well. Now the join kind is left outer join, which means it will fetch all the records from the first table, which is e-sales advanced, and only the matching records from the second table. And I'm going to press OK. Now if you see, it has merged the customer detail table here, and it's showing you column with the collapsed view of the entire table. Now it's up to us to select what column we require. So for that, we're going to click on this small arrow icon here. It will show you all the columns which are available after the merging. I only need customer name and segment from this. So select that and press OK. Now if you see, it is fetching those 2 columns from the customer details, and the remaining is from e-sale advance. And it's only fetching the matching ones. It will not fetch everything. So let's see if anything is not matching in this. But I'm assuming everything is matching because the customer detail is the master table which contains all customer IDs. So it should not have any nulls in it. So if I open up this filter here, load more. So if you see, everything is matching. Okay. So which means because the customer detail table was my exhaustive list of all customers, it does not have any null values. But in case if your primary table had some values which was not there in your secondary table, then in those cases, you would have null in these columns. Now let's look at some other join types. So let's go back to the settings again. So in this source, I'm going to click on this gear icon. And within this, you will again see those join kinds. So instead of left outer, I'm going to choose right outer, which means everything from the second table, but only the matching ones from the first table. Okay. Let's select this and press OK. Now, if you see, you would not observe any difference in this because there would be no nulls here, even if I load more, right? But if you remember, my second table had lot more customer IDs than my first table. So your customer ID will have blanks or null values. So if I load more, and you'll see that these row items are those row items where we had some value in your second table, but my first table did not have any corresponding customer IDs. Let's go back to the setting again. Let's choose the next join, which is full outer, which means it gives you everything from both the tables. So if I select this and press OK, it will give me all the customer IDs which were there in my first table, but along with that, it is also giving me null values as well, which were there in my second table. Now you would wonder why can't I get customer ID in this? Because this column is referring to my first table. If you want customer ID, then what you need to do is in your expand custom detail settings, just select customer ID here, press OK. And now you will also have the customer ID of those row items which are missing. So let's select null. And if you scroll right, you will see that we have customer IDs for those rows as well. Later on, you can choose to kind of club these two columns together to get a compiled list of records. So I'm going to just remove the filter here, go back to the setting again. The next one is inner join, which means only the matching rows between both of the tables. Now this will fetch the same results as my left join in this case, because if you remember, my customer ID in the second table is an exhaustive list. So everything from first table exists in my second table. So even if I do an inner join, it will still fetch me the same records as my left join. Okay. So if I select the customer ID here, load more, I will not find any null values. All right. Go back to the source again. Now the next two are really interesting. It's left anti and right anti. The left anti means it will give me only those rows from the first table which have no match in my second table. Okay. Now left anti would not give me any result. It should give me a blank. Like you see, it's giving me a blank here because there were no records which were not present in my second table. Every record from my first table were present in my second table. Okay. Let's select the source again. And this time let's select right anti. Now this one will return the rows from my second table which has no match from my first table. Okay. Now this will give me some records. You'll see that all the customer IDs are null here. So everything which were not present in my first table is fetching those records. Okay. So these are the different types of join you can use in different scenarios. Okay. So now let's look at one more use case for joins or merge. Let's select left outer again. Imagine that your data contains customer IDs which are repeating for each region. So let's say this customer 181 is repeating for West, East, South and North. So that would mean that your customer ID is not a unique row, and when you're joining it with another table, and if it also has multiple customer IDs for different regions, so that would mean you're creating a join which has a many to many relationship, which means there are many records for one customer ID in this table and there are many records for one customer ID in the second table as well. And many to many joins are never a good idea. As a data personnel, we should always try to avoid doing many to many joins because that creates lot of inconsistencies and data integrity issues. So it's always better where your one table has unique rows and the other one can have unique or many rows, which means you're doing a one to many join or many to one join. Now in this use case, because you want to create a one to many or many to one record, relying on just customer ID will not suffice, right? You would have to include one more column into your join which would make it unique. In order to do that, while you're selecting a column here, just press Control and select region as well. So now you're joining these two columns with these two columns in this table. Okay, so I've selected region as well by pressing Control in both the tables. And if you see, it is marked with 1 and 2 here, which means in this table, it's clubbing these two columns together, then joining that with clubbed output of secondary table. So essentially what we have done is we are creating a unique key based on customer ID and region. So even if customer ID is repeating for different regions, because we are clubbing your region column into this, it's creating a unique key now. Now if I press OK, it will join everything and give you the output. I just want to mention a couple of key pointers. When you're applying joins, there are high probability that you encounter errors. Now there are some key things you should keep in mind. First is column time mismatch. Make sure both columns are of same data type. Ensure that you're joining in the correct direction. You're joining from the first table to the second table or vice versa, so that your primary table and your secondary table are as per your requirements. And third, and the most important, be very careful with your many-to-many relationships. It can drastically inflate your data with unnecessary issues in your data integrity. Okay, so now let's look at another very important technique, which is called appending. Appending queries in Power Query means it allows you to stack tables on top of each other. It's like copying and pasting multiple datasets into a single master table. Now, this is especially useful when working with monthly, quarterly, or departmental files that share same structure. In this section, we'll explore manual appending, folder-based auto-appending, and best practices for combining data at a scale. For this exercise, I have splitted our earlier sales advance data into 3 files, which contains January, February, and March data in separate files. Okay, so we're going to import that files in, and you're going to find the link to download these dataset in the description below. Okay, so I'm going to import that data in. It's in a CSV file. I've placed these files in a different folder. Okay, once we have loaded all these data, let's go to the Power Query editor. So now at the left, you see all these 3 dataset. And as I mentioned, each of them contains sales for their individual month. Now to append these 3 tables together, what we have to do is in the Home tab, there's a button called Append Queries. Again, it's a drop down. So when you click on it, there are 2 options, Append Queries and Append Queries as new. Append Queries will append everything in the selected table, but we want it to append in a new table. So I'm going to click on Append Query as new. Now this is asking for your first and second table, but in our case, we have 3 tables. So we're going to select this option, which says 3 or more tables. And now we can select multiple tables and add it in. So sales Jan is already added here. So sales Feb and sales March. Press OK. Now it has created a new query by the name of append 1, and it contains data for all January, February, and March. Now one key thing to note is that while appending, ensure your column headers are the same and your column data type are the same. Otherwise, Power Query will create duplicate columns and those columns will have null values. Now, this technique is okay if you have a couple of files, right? Manually adding the files. But what if inside a folder you have more than 100 files and you want all of them to be appended together? This is where you use a folder-based appending technique. So this is how you do that. Just click on close, and I'm going to discard the changes here. Discard changes, and also delete these data from the data model. Okay. Now from the get data section, go to more, and here you will find an option which is called folder. What this does is it considers the folder as a data source, and whatever is stored inside the folder, it will append everything together. Okay. So I'm going to click on connect, select the folder, press OK. Now it is showing you all the files which are available in that particular folder, which are January, February, and March sales data. Here you have 2 options, combine, load, transform data, and cancel. So I'm going to click on this combine here, and then within this, just click on combine and load. Also, as mentioned earlier, make sure the column structure, data type are all the same for all the files. Okay. It's going to give you a preview. Press OK. This will automatically compile everything together, append all the files, and give you the final result in your data tab. Now let's see if it has combined everything together properly or not. I'm going to go to the Power Query editor. Within this, you'll see this new query which says folder 3. This contains everything from that particular folder. And if you notice, it has added a new column by the name of source.name, which is again a good thing for us because now we can easily identify which data comes from which file. So it tells you it's from sales Feb, sales Jan, or sales March. Few best practices you should keep in mind while doing this. Always check column alignment. Always have a column where you can track data's origin. In this case, it has already created that source.name. But in case you're using the manual method, ensure that you create a custom column so that you can know from where that file came from. Ensure that the data type, column names are all consistent across all the files. And if you have multiple files to append, it's a best practice to kind of use folder-based appending method where you can easily automate this process. And only thing that you would have to do from next time onwards is close and apply. Every time when you open up this Power BI, just click on refresh. This will automatically go to that folder, fetch everything which is there, and then append it together. Power Query interface is really user-friendly, but behind the scenes, every transformation you apply is written in a language called M. In this module, we will lift the curtain and walk through how to use the advanced editor to view, write, and modify MCode directly for more dynamic and controlled data transformations. MCode in itself is a very big topic. So in this video, I'm going to give you just the introduction into MCode. The Power Query interface is intuitive enough so that you can do most of the activities without ever going into advanced editor. So let's see how you can edit an MCode directly from this window, which is the Power Query window. So whenever you select any step that you applied onto your data, right, you can see that step inside this formula bar here. Tells you what that step is exactly doing. Now this is a good way to edit your step without ever going into the advanced editor window. Now if I open up advanced editor by clicking on this button, this will show you all the steps which are applied on that data set. And if you look at it, it has three main steps applied to it. First one is the source, where it's fetching its information from. Then second step was promote headers. And then it has directly applied some data type changes based on the information it fetched from few top rows of the data. Now, if you notice, there is a pattern here. The statement here starts with a let statement. It always starts with a let. Then the step starts. The first step will tell you the source of the data set. The second step, although it tells you what it does, but it also tells you where it came from, as in what was the previous step. So every previous step will be mentioned in your subsequent steps. So here the source is mentioned, which is nothing but this step. And here the promoted header is mentioned, which is nothing but this step. And finally, the entire thing ends with an in statement, and whatever was the last step is written at the end. This way, Power Query knows what step came after what step. And that is how it shows you the history on the right side panel here in the applied step section. Now let's do one thing. I'm going to create a new data source here. And instead of selecting any of these, I'm going to say blank query. And now let's write our M code manually into this blank query. Okay. So I'm going to go to advanced editor. The let and in structure is already there. So in the source, let's choose a source. I'm going to copy a table name here. Let's use this as a source. Come back to this query, advanced editor, and inside source, I can directly mention this. Now I don't need a double quotes or anything because it's not a CSV file. It's a dataset which exists within Power Query. So I can directly mention it like this. Remember to add a comma sign because now we're going into the next step. Then let's add a filter to this data source. So I'm going to say filtered, and you can name it anything you like. The next thing is the M code to select few rows, which is nothing but a filter, which we do in normal Excel or Power BI. So table dot select rows. Now if you see, we have table.select columns as well. And we also have table.select rows with errors as well. Okay, so there are many options in MCode, and that's why I said it's a big topic in itself. We would not be able to cover everything in this video, but I just want to show you how you can manually write MCode and create a new data set. Okay, so select rows, open up bracket. Here you will write your previous step, okay, which is nothing but source, comma, and you have to apply filter. So whenever you're iterating your filter row by row, you need to mention each. So that it can iterate that formula for each row. So each, inside a square bracket, I'm going to say quantity and then greater than, let's say 50. Okay. And at the end here, use the same name as your last step. So filtered. Now it says no syntax errors. I'm going to just click on done. It does not show me any data. Let's see what happened. I'm going to go to eSales Advanced. The quantity, I wrote greater than 50. And I think we don't have anything greater than 50. Let's go back to the query. Now, instead of going to the advanced editor, I know the filtered section is the problem. I can edit it from here itself. So let's say anything greater than 5. Click on this tick icon. And now it has gave me all those data sets. Now remember, you can also apply parameters like we learned earlier inside this. Okay. So to use a parameter here, I'm going to go back to advanced editor, and then inside this last step, I can say, and let's use the region column equal to, in normal scenario, I can write like this, but since we're using a parameter, I would not write it like this. Instead, I'm going to say selected region. So if you see, it's showing you that parameters that we created earlier. Select that, press done. And now the region is north and the quantity is anything greater than 5. That is because the selected region is set to north right now. Now, the M language gives you full control over data transformation in Power Query. So whether you are cleaning, reshaping, or combining data, mastering advanced editor and M language opens up a world of possibilities, okay? So don't worry, you don't need to memorize everything, but understanding what the formula bar and editor are doing behind the scene helps you debug, optimize, and make your queries more flexible. As your data transformation get more complex, it becomes essential to ensure your queries are not only functional but also robust, fast, and scalable. In this module, we'll cover error handling techniques, query performance tuning, and best practices like modular design and efficient memory usage, which are key steps that separate good queries from great ones. Okay, let's talk about errors. Now, you might have performed multiple transformation steps on your data, but if you don't know how to handle errors, then it will be a tricky situation for you. So let's see how we can bypass certain errors which happens in your data while transforming. Let me import one dataset, and this is the same dataset that we were using, but I've deliberately inserted few error values within this dataset. And in the preview window, you can see that the quantity column contains few text values which says error. From this window, I'm going to just click on transform data. In the Power Query window, you can see that the quantity is showing as an ABC, which is a text data type. Now, obviously, we don't want that because quantity is a number column. But because we have these text values here which says error, it's showing you as an ABC. Now, even if I click on this ABC and change it to a whole number, it will still give you an error. And now this is a proper error which Power Query identifies, right? It's not a text, it's an error basically. And if I click on this error cell here, it will say that we couldn't convert to number. So I'm going to just cancel this step out. This is the most common type of error which happens in Power Query, because usually when the raw data comes in, there are certain anomalies which are there, which needs to be cleaned up before we can actually change the data type. Now, in this case, the fix is really simple. Click on this column and go to transform. There's a button here which says replace values. Click on that drop down and then click on replace errors. It's going to ask you what value should replace the error value. I'm going to say 0 here and press OK. So all the errors which were there in that column now has been replaced with a 0. Now this is one way of getting rid of your errors, but identifying error at the first place is also very important. So in this example, because our dataset is very small, I could simply scroll down and see which all rows have an error value. But if your data is really big, there should be a way by which you can identify if there are any errors in each of your columns. So I'm going to just cancel out this replace error step here so that the error value comes back. Now in Power Query, in the View tab, there's a very good option to see if your column contains an error or not. It's called Column Quality. So you can just enable this checkbox here. And now it's showing you that in this column, you have 15% error values. I'm going to select this column again. And now in the Transform tab, I'm going to click on this Replace Values and Replace Errors. Replace that with a 0 and press OK. And now it has refreshed again and it is showing as 0%. Now, what will you do if your error happens when you create a custom column? So for this, first of all, I'm going to just remove this replace error step here. Okay, so that we have some errors in this. And then let me add another column. Click on this custom column here. Let's keep the name as custom only. And now the column that I'm creating, I'm trying to identify the price of a product. Okay, so for that, I'm going to divide this revenue column with the quantity column. Press OK. And now if you see, we have values in few of the rows, but we also have errors because the quantity column for that row was also an error. So to remove this error, what you can do is you can write a custom M code to handle errors. So I'm going to click on this gear icon here, and within this formula, write something which is called as try and otherwise. So I'm going to say try otherwise 0. So it's going to try this formula, and if it finds an error, it will assign a 0 to it. So I'm going to press OK here. And now if you see, all the error values in this column has gone away. Although if you notice the column quality section here, it's still showing 15%. That's because this section has not been refreshed. So for that, let me add one more transformation step so that it refreshes itself. So I'm going to add a filter here on the product, and let's select a few of them. And now if you see, it has refreshed itself. It's saying 0%. These are the two very basic error handling techniques which works on almost every scenario. So you should keep this in mind whenever you are transforming a data set. Now let's talk about query folding. Now this is a very important topic and a very huge one as it is. So I'm going to try to give you a brief about query folding and enable you to use it in your projects. And I'm going to link a video in the description which gives you little more detailed explanation of query folding and how to handle query folding. But in essence, what query folding is, when Power Query pushes the transformation back to the source system, like for example, your database SQL Server. So the processing happens at the server side, not on the front end Power BI. Now this has two main benefits. It only gets the data after transformation. So obviously the data is lighter, and because of that, less memory is used in Power BI. So your reports are quicker and faster. Now, before I could show you how query folding works, let me import the data in from a SQL Server, because right now this data set is from a text CSV, and query folding only works when you're working with some kind of a database in the backend. So I'm going to go to Home, click on New Source, and within this, let's choose SQL Server. And the server name, I'm going to paste in my local instance of my server name. But in your case, you should have a different server name. And I'm going to keep the data connectivity mode as import only. Press OK. Now this is my database, BI. I'm going to expand this. And within this, I'm going to choose this data, which is coffee sales. This is something that we have already used in our previous modules. The link for the data will be in the description. You can download that. I'm going to select this and press OK. Now let's apply a transformation step, and I'll show you how you can check if query folding is happening on a transformation that you applied or not. So let's select this coffee name column, and then within this, let's apply a filter. Within this, I only want cappuccino, cold brew, and espresso, and press OK. Now it has added a new step onto the applied steps section. Now to understand if query folding is happening in your transformation step or not is by right clicking on that step, and then at the end you will see this option which says view native query. If this option is enabled, that means query folding is likely happening. So I'm going to click on this view native query, and it's going to show you a query which it's creating so that it can run on your source system, which is SQL Server in this case, and the output will be fetched back into Power BI. So most of the heavy lifting is done at the backend, and Power BI does not have to worry about all those transformation steps. So I'm going to press OK here. Now that you know that on this filtered row section, query folding is enabled and it is working. But what are the scenarios where query folding does not work? I'm going to go to add column here and create a custom column. Let's name this as custom only. And in the formula, I'm going to write a custom function, text.start. It's a function which fetches the initial portion of your text based on the parameters that you provide. So in the coffee name column, I'm going to use the coffee name column. I want 3 characters from the start, and then I'm going to press OK. Now text.start, remember, is a custom function which exists in Power BI, especially in MCode, but does not specifically exist in SQL. We have a SQL equivalent for this, but let's see if this step folds or not. I'm going to press OK. Obviously, I have the result here. If I right click and click on view native query, it is enabled, which means this step was successfully folded and it translated onto SQL Server using this left function here. So the text.start effectively folded. Now let me apply one more custom step. So custom column, let's keep this as custom 1. And in this case, let's use a custom function known as text.positionOf. Now this function simply gives you the position of a particular string in an entire cell value. So I'm going to choose, let's say, coffee name again, and I'm going to search the word cap, and then I'm going to say occurrence.first, which means it's going to give me the position of the first occurrence of that particular word, which is cap, inside this column. I'm going to press OK. So now it has created that column. It's showing me that the cap here is occurring at the 0 position, which is perfectly fine. Now right click on the add custom one here and let's see if it is folded or not. So right click, and if you see, this is disabled, which means this particular step or this particular function does not necessarily translate back to SQL Server, and that's why it is not folded. And everything that is happening inside this column is happening locally on this Power BI, not on the server. Now, the last thing that we will discuss today in this module in query optimization is how to use staging queries and then disabling and enabling load to increase the Power Query front-end performance. So what do I mean by staging queries? Basically, when you have a raw data set, you might apply multiple transformation steps onto that raw data set to make it useful for final visualization. Now, during this process, you might want to create your data in multiple stages. So this is what I mean. Let's say, for example, in this coffee sales, when you loaded the data in, you might want to keep the data as it is and then right click and create a reference table. And then let's create this into a mapping table. So I'm going to call it as mapping. And within this, I'm going to remove every column except for this coffee name. So for that, I'm going to select this column, right click and click on remove other columns. And then from this top left menu here, I'm going to select and say remove duplicates. This is going to give me a unique list of coffee names. Now in this table, what we did in the coffee sales table by creating this custom column, I'm going to do that in this instead of that larger table. So I'm going to add a new custom column, and this is the formula that we used, which is text.start, 3 characters from the beginning, and press OK. It's created that column now. Now what I will do is I'll join these 2 tables together. So I'm going to click on this coffee sales, go to home tab, click on merge queries, merge query as new. From this, select coffee name. The second table would be my mapping table. Select coffee name from this as well. Press OK. Now it has merged that new column here. So I'm going to select this arrow here, select only custom, press OK. Now we have this new column from that other table in the merged query here. And let's rename this to final data. Now I can consider all the previous dataset as my staging table because those values or those tables are not required for my final visualization. What is required is the final data, not anything else. So what I can do is I can right click on each one of them, and you see this option which is called enable load. You can just click here. That will disable the load. Okay. It will not load this table when I click on close and apply, and it will not show up on the front end. So right click here, disable load, and this one as well. And for this final data, keep it as it is because we want this to be in the front end. So now if I click on close and apply, it's evaluating everything. But if you see, it's only loading the final data, not the other ones. And if I go to the data here, it's showing only final data, not the other tables. Now this reduces the load that you've put on the front end visualization itself, because now it don't have to worry about loading that data onto the front end. Staging queries helps you in a couple of aspects. First of all, it reduces repetition, which makes maintenance easier. Then second is reusability. Because you have your staging tables, you can always go back to your staging table to create a reference out of those tables and apply a different kind of transformation onto that second version of the final data for a different kind of visualization. So that's a wrap on the entire module here. We saw how to bulletproof your queries with error handling, improve speed with query folding, and optimize design using staging queries and memory efficient loading. These techniques will help you build scalable, production grade reports that are easier to manage and maintain. So with this, we are ending this Power Query masterclass. In case you think that I've missed something and want to cover something else in detail, please let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to cover that. And if you like this masterclass, I'll suggest you can also check out my DAX masterclass video. The link will be in the description. And in case you've learned something valuable from this entire content, then please consider subscribing to the channel and hit that notification bell icon so that you do not miss any content that I upload. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.